And it looks like we are live once again. Welcome back to another episode of the Manny Wolfe Show. Today, my guest is, and we say this a lot, so I'm going to give a caveat. Today, my guest is my friend, KYREE Oliver. Everybody says that all the time in the world of Facebook, and I think that it's a little bit disingenuous. To be honest, KYREE and I have only spoken a handful of times, but to my mind, we've been, it's one of those connections that feels legit. Like if I saw this guy, we'd hang out. Mm-hmm. You do a lot of cool things. You do a lot of disparate things, one from the other. And so I'm just going to, at the very beginning, say that I met you sort of as a Facebook ads guy, but there's a little bit more going on here than that. So first, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. Very well,
Good.
actually.
And how is the new artwork? How's the new ink?
It's good. We just kind of added some detail to my sleeve a little bit, so it's wrapped up and healing right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
In the time we've known each other, let's see. We had plotted an entrepreneur. I don't know what you'd call it exactly. It had no business goal to it. It was just like
a hangout dinner.
Yeah, like a hangout dinner, which is still a worthy idea as far as I'm concerned. However, you know, life being what it is, stupid effing coronavirus being what it is, and all that stuff, it may have to be put on hold. You have also started what kind of a coaching program? I see the stuff you put out. I'm not exactly sure how you describe it. So tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I don't know what I call it yet.
Okay.
It doesn't have a name. I'm more of the create the thing than name it. Then name something and then try to create something around the name. I'd rather it just be what it is and then figure out a good name to encapsulate it. It's life coaching.
Right.
With a masculine frame of mind, I guess. Like that's our perspective, is from somebody who wants to understand their role as a masculine person in the world.
Yeah.
There's also another side where I work with powerful women who need to understand that masculine doesn't serve them to their highest ability.
That's an interesting place to take off for a moment.
Yeah.
I recently concluded a coaching program, I guess, where I was coaching someone who is very, very high up. I don't know, maybe very, very deep into the world of the feminine and the masculine and the archetypes and all of that stuff. And there's a lot to explore there, but it was really interesting. Her angle. I shouldn't say angle. I don't want to say anything that sounds accidentally like I'm diminishing her work, because her work is fascinating to me, just fascinating. But her work is around what she calls divine feminine submission, which in the course of working together a little bit, I realized I totally misunderstood that. I sort of had much as I'm ashamed to say it, or not ashamed, but playfully ashamed to say it, I had the 50 Shades of Grey sort of level of understanding of that work, right?
Submission, yeah.
Oh, you like to be tied up and fucked. That's great. That's wonderful. I'm sure it's got to be a lot of volunteers for that one. There's a lot more to it, man. And so when we'll start with the women you work with. When you work with powerful women, what's the most sort of interesting or common thing that you see that is sort of their front and center challenge?
Yeah. Past trauma. It's always past abuse from a man in their life. It was their dad, it was their uncle, it was their ex-husband, their ex-boyfriend. Something taught them that masculine figures in your life are going to take advantage of you or betray you or leave you or do something negative towards you. Because of that, a lot of women have gotten the idea that you can't trust masculine outside of yourself, so you have to become masculine inside of yourself in order to protect yourself against the masculine that's out there.
Interesting.
And one of the things and one of the reasons I think a lot of it goes unnoticed is because along with having that masculine view and that masculine presence in the world,
yeah,
women start to accomplish a lot of shit.
That's what I was just, keep going.
Yeah.
But that's what I was going to bring up.
They shut off a lot of the emotional side, a lot of the powerful feminine side of themselves.
Yeah.
That allows you to connect and really understand other people and have the more of the human side where they can just go set a goal, reach a goal, set a goal, reach a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's an incredibly masculine way to live.
Yeah.
What they don't realize is at the same time, they're suffocating the thing that makes them the most powerful thing in the world.
Right. Which is
their femininity, their ability to be feminine, their ability to have that divine submission when it's relevant or when it's necessary. So we just help. And again, I'm not the person who wants to define what feminine is,
right?
But I'm just kind of opening the door towards that of, here's something you may have been neglecting. Mm-hmm. Let me provide you space, because you're not going to out masculine me if we're in a conversation or if you're a coaching client of mine.
Right.
Let me provide enough masculine that you feel safe and comfortable being feminine and learning to step back into that for yourself.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, this same client who I think it's appropriate to be anonymous, but I would be more than happy to name her. I really like her work. She said in one of our calls, there's really only two games in town, money and sex. And I thought that was pretty good, right? Like, so in other words, your stuff shows up either in the professional world or in the intimate world, and oftentimes both. But she works with women who tend to have one or the other really, they're either getting all the guys and the wonderful relationships, or they're out there burning it down and conquering. And conquering. What does, like, I guess, first of all, I agree that it's always a trauma thing. There's a show that Tina Fey did that wasn't quite as popular as her main show, 30 Rock, called The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, where
I remember watching that. Yeah,
it's funny stuff, man. It's clever stuff. But there's one episode where Tina Fey herself does a little cameo as a like bipolar drunk therapist or something. It's awesome. Yeah. And so in her drunken state, she goes, "Look, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but it's always your parents." It's every single time. It's always the parents.
Yeah.
And I was like, so much, with as much time as I've spent in this world, it's so true, man. And that's kind of the beauty of coaches that therapists, don't have, is like, we can go, look, you got to look at your parents, you got to look at these past relationships. So let's go a little bit into, what does it look like to if it is like, you're either going to be great in having relationships and attracting love, or you're going to be great in conquering and goal setting and everything. Leaving aside for a moment the people who aren't really doing either. Mm-hmm. It's a separate kind of group. How does building that bridge kind of show up? How do we help them to do both?
Yeah. Well, so I think you always have a leading dynamic. And again, this is for most people. Some people are very balanced. You almost always have a leading dynamic. You either lead with your masculine or you lead with your feminine. Your natural tendency is going to be one way or the other. And I think for good relationships, you have to have that polarization. I'm incredibly masculine. My girlfriend's incredibly feminine. When she feels herself being pulled into the masculine space, she starts feeling uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't allow her creativity. It doesn't allow her openness for her business. It doesn't allow her to be who she knows she is at her best.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's an important dynamic. It's, I forget the guy's name, but Way of the Superior Man is a good book on masculine, feminine dynamics and creating that polarization in heterosexual and all different.
I would imagine every configuration.
Types, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
All different types of relationships. Creating that polarization is incredibly important, because there's the push and pull, because there's, I've got this piece handled, you have that piece handled, and together somehow we're able to create a good equilibrium with ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting too, because when you get that, how can I put this? it's as though reality itself changes a little bit. You know what I mean? When you have, if you're just a man in the world conquering and setting goals and being, you know, I'm not going to say the alpha because that's a little played out, but you know what I mean? You're doing the very masculine thing. You're cutting through life and all that. It can feel pretty good. Mm-hmm. You could do that, never really being sort of kind of aware of what you're missing.
Very well
and
said.
Then that very kind of feminine energy comes in, and it's like what I imagine a shot of emotional methamphetamines would be. You know what I mean? It's just like, holy crap. I remember Tony Robbins talking about the misunderstanding of men wanting sex all the time. Mm-hmm. Right? He says, it's not that we want sex all the time in the way that it's portrayed. It's that we feed off knowing that you're giving yourself to us completely. You're 100% open to us. And when you feel that back in your play, man, so far it's the best thing I've ever experienced.
But that's what the feminine does. It's openness.
Yeah, exactly.
It's allowing, and it's creating, again, space.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly powerful. When I work with these women, again, I see it over and over again. I work with these women, and as soon as they start to step back into it, their businesses explode. Yeah. Their relationships flourish. Their ability to just be and do is, I mean, it skyrockets because they didn't realize how much they'd been limiting themselves by doing the task-oriented, every single thing needs to be very robotic and very, again, just very, very masculine. There's a great analogy, and I forget who said it, but like within business, there's 4 phases of your business. Mm-hmm. You have the peasant, where you're just getting into business, you're trying to figure it out, you're asking all these questions around, you're basically begging people for information. How do I get this to get started? How do I do it? And then you have the warrior or the soldier. You've got some of your business figured out, but you're still trudging through. You still feel like you have something to fight against. And that's the very masculine way of handling business. I'm fighting against something. I'm going to be successful because fuck you. Those type of people are still in that warrior phase. Then you have feminine magnetism. And feminine magnetism is where I'm at in my business, where I'd say you're probably at or close to in your business, where a lot of the people that I like to surround myself are with their business. We just do what we do. Right. There's no fight against anything or anybody.
Right.
We do what we do, and we get paid well for it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it starts to feel like I'm just getting paid just to be me. I'm getting paid just to do what I do and talk about what I naturally enjoy talking about. And people pay me good money for it. That's insane.
Yeah.
It's incredibly feminine because we had to open that space for ourselves.
Yeah.
Then you get into God mode. God mode of business is anything you touch turns to gold. You're Oprah Winfrey, you're Tony Robbins, you're Jeff Bezos, you're just in anything I touches turns to absolute gold. Yeah. There's very few of those people, but we all know their names.
Right.
Yeah. I think for most of us, feminine magnetism is where we're supposed to go in business. You want to get to that nice little, that streamline that feels good, where you can catch that draft of warm wind and you can kind of just carry yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think especially, I mean, I imagine it translates across, most kinds of business, but especially in this coaching and information and, you almost want to call it transformation, but that's a little played out too. But in this kind of work that you and I both do, I think you're absolutely right. I would definitely aspire still to get into God mode, but obviously,
don't we all?
yeah. And maybe a conversation for another time. I feel like coronavirus has actually put me in that mode, as strange as that may sound. I shifted completely. I'm still doing some of the stuff that you probably know me for, but I shifted into a serious focus on building a new educational system, frankly. Just a new let's don't keep trying to incrementally fix public education. Let's let the free market fix it. Let's go where there are no constrictions and it's all creativity and we can do whatever we want. I got 2 visionary educators with me. I mean, you have to call him a genius marketing pro. And now we're just bringing into the mix a guy with a 28-year track record at IBM and AT&T as a designer.
Not bad. Do I know the marketing guy?
I don't know. I'll ask you off camera.
Okay.
I'll ask you off camera. Cool. He's from he's between our 2 generations.
Gotcha.
And I remember asking my mentor Peter Voog if he knew him, and he goes, "I really only know the guys of my generation." All right, man, punk.
That's the case a lot of times.
Yeah, but it does feel like that right now. Like, I mean, we wanted to treat this thing as a tech startup, and within 2 weeks of saying that out loud, we get a guy who literally is the guy who can oversee building the whole tech infrastructure. It's insanity. Yeah. And it's just like everything we do, just things keep firing. Anyway, so what about the guys? What's your main focus with the guys? Is it helping them to embody their masculinity, or is it helping them to kind of, let's do this first. Let's talk about the difference between the sort of the low quality, the low value, quote unquote, alpha and real masculinity. Let's make that definition first, that distinction.
Yeah. So, well, I see there's 2 sides of the spectrum that men currently occupy. It's the rah-rah masculine. I'm going to shut off my emotions. And nobody gets access to me because fuck you. That's why. It's the same thing as in the business space.
It's the do you even lift, bro?
Exactly. It's I've got to test you before you're allowed to even come talk to me. Like, who are you to come speak to me? Yeah. Lowly peasant type of energy. Yeah. There's the other side of, I mean, I'd say sometimes it goes even into the abandoning masculinity. You've been shown somehow that being less masculine is a positive for your life. And a lot of times these men will throw masculinity completely out the window and kind of live in that feminine flowy state for the rest of their lives. And I'd say if you're happy with it, have fun. Most of the time I've seen men happy with it for a few months or maybe even a few years. Yeah. And something just catastrophic happens and they don't know how to deal with it because you forgot how to be masculine. Yeah. You forgot how to be a man in certain ways. Yeah. And so I'm trying to bring a little bit of an equilibrium to the masculinity space. You're not the rah-rah emotionless. Yeah. You're also not the flowy, having orgies in Bali all day long.
Yeah. Yeah. The sort of energetically androgynous kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, I firmly believe that human experience needs the polarities. I really do think that. And so when I see those, we'll call them energetically androgynous. When I see that energy in this, in life, it's kind of like you said, I look at that and I go, well, I mean, I hope it's working for you now because most likely there's a cliff.
And you can't do much for other people with that.
That's the thing. Yeah, exactly.
You're not able to show up how people need you to show up. They're the ones who you see them in interviews. They never give a straight answer. Everything's flowy and floating off into the ether somewhere. It's like there's nothing concrete because you don't know concrete anymore. Yeah. You don't even know how to transition into concrete when it's necessary and then maybe flow back out of it. Right. That's more something I'm looking for. Yeah. Let me be like the ethereal, the meta sometimes, but let me always flow back into concrete when somebody needs a concrete answer. Or else when somebody comes to you with this life problem, you can't just say, surrender to the universe and everything will work out. Because that doesn't help when I'm about to lose my house. It doesn't help when I'm about to lose my relationship. Right. It doesn't help when I need concrete and you're over here floating in the clouds. Yeah.
I was raised not just by one person, but in a cult full of men that were doing that. They had these ambiguous, diaphanous solutions to everything. Everything was about some far-fetched philosophical, like, but I'm hungry right now, and I'm just a little kid. Yeah,
a whole bunch of nothing.
Yeah, I don't want any philosophy.
It sounds good to them, and it sounds good to people who speak that language like them.
Yeah.
They can all sit in a circle and say a whole bunch of nothing for hours to each other. And at the end of the day, if you're a person who's not in that space and you don't speak that language, you would sit there and say, you guys have just said nothing for 3 hours.
Yeah.
But everybody's full of joy. Everybody's full of happy.
Are they full of joy and happy, or are they full of bypass?
They're full of bypass. It's it's escapism.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's nothing more. It's nothing, oh, you just don't get it. Because people love to do that as well. You just don't get it. No, you just are on the wrong path, and you've convinced yourself it's right because it's easy.
Yeah. One of the things that I really think is important, something I love, something that's needed, and something that possibly is in short supply that I would say comes directly from the masculine is being able to say things like that. They're so sort of socially, like you want to avoid them like you avoid dog poop on the sidewalk. You don't want to veer away the hell out of your way, but you just want to kind of sidestep them, But in life and in the world, we need to be able to say, man, this is how it is.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't how it is. Motherfucker, you wrong. Not always, maybe, but right now.
Yeah. Sometimes this isn't helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are we accomplishing here? We're accomplishing nothing other than sitting in a circle. And it's a weird, it doesn't help too much. So I was watching something the other day about, and it posed a really good question. And I really thought about it for a while. And it says, without the capacity to be evil, can you really be good? Like, if a man's not capable of evil, can he really make the choice to be good? And I realized, like, oh, the answer is no. You have to have that shadow piece of yourself. You have to have that capacity for violence, that capacity for hurt, that capacity for anger, for rage, in order to choose good along the way.
Yeah.
If you don't have a choice or a capacity for bad, you're not choosing good. You're just doing nothing.
That's an important distinction.
Yeah.
And there's sort of a having been neutered quality to that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's I would imagine that being neutered limits your worldview.
Yeah.
And perhaps from that limited perspective, you're like, well, I'm choosing to be good. I saw a lot of that too growing up. A lot of like, you couldn't stand on your own 2 feet if you had to.
No, if your life depended on it.
Yeah, literally.
Or if somebody's out here choking out your wife.
Yeah,
you can't do anything about it.
I think that perhaps generally speaking, there's those ideas live in not the ideas of can you choose good without being capable of evil. That I think is valid. And if it makes people uncomfortable to hear those words, I think that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Tough. There's this sort of movement toward wanting to not acknowledge the duality that is just real.
Mm-hmm.
In Kempo, it was either Kempo or Aikido. I had a period where I was studying both of them at the same time. It was my whole life was martial arts. And one of my teachers, one of my senseis, he would have us watch YouTube videos of street fights.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this was a really, really cool thing because he's like, you can tell as two guys or two women or whatever, as they're posting up on each other, one energy has to be dominant. You can't have a stasis, an equilibrium of two energies in any conversation. And like, even right now, it's like you and I are giving it back and forth. Mm-hmm. We're making a choice together from a place of It's cool if you're in charge for a minute.
It's mutual respect.
Yeah, exactly. But
so this is what it is, and I don't mean to cut you off. It's I'm able to give it because I don't have a fear of not getting it back.
Precisely.
That's exactly it.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Once you know, I mean, I won't go too far into this, but I have a track record that proves that I'm capable of violence.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I got people you can ask, you know.
But you can tell with those people.
Yeah.
I don't know any of your history. Yeah. There's nothing in me that would question that at all.
Right. Yeah. And likewise, one of the beauties that I don't hear people talking about of sort of being grounded in that acceptance of that duality. I can choose to be good because I know that I can get down in the ugly.
Yep.
You know, it allows you something that during my time in martial arts, I started to think of as like the more evolved level of alpha.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get into the online space and I'm like, oh, evolved alpha is like a whole thing, you know. But
it's a whole lot of talk though.
Yeah. Online. But so that ability to be grounded enough and locked in enough and secure enough in yourself to allow to give the throne to the other guy for a minute. I know what it feels like to not have that too.
Yep.
I know what it feels like to enter into energy dynamics with people and just not, you know, either be totally overwhelmed or be trying so hard to sort of keep your ground or to be the one overwhelming. And none of that is comfortable.
No. I was on a podcast a month ago where that was the case. The guy came in trying to butt heads and I had to slow down luckily it was live because I don't think it would have gone out if it wasn't live. So luckily it was live and I had to slow down and say, hey, are we measuring dicks or are you interviewing me? Because if we're measuring dicks, I can come in and I can just start cutting you off every sentence. I can just speak over you and I can do that thing. But I'd much rather us just have a cool conversation.
Yeah.
And what happened actually is guy apologized and said, I actually brought you on here to hopefully like making you look a certain way because I had a certain perception of you. And he's like, in talking to you, I'm now realizing that my perception is changing. And like, it was actually ended up being a really cool conversation, but it started off with that, I'm going to out masculine you.
Yeah.
And same thing, like you've said, and you can do it in martial arts. Martial arts is a great example of it, or boxing is a great example of it.
Mm-hmm.
Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
Floyd Mayweather, because he has more capacity for boxing violence than Conor McGregor, says, I'm going to take you out into deep water because I've been there before.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been there so many times before.
Yeah.
I'm going to take you out into deep water and I'm going to drown you.
Yeah.
And that's the exact same thing. I've done that shadow side of yourself. I've done the dark side of yourself. I understand that side of myself and I've seen it and I've been there and I know how to tap into it from a high level of sports to business to personal life. Once you've been there, when you know you're talking to somebody who hasn't, you're comfortable. You don't have to get loud. You don't have to get boisterous because at the end of the day, I know I can take you out into deep water and I can drown you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not always a physical sense. Sometimes it's in a conversation. Sometimes it's in an argument. Sometimes it's competing for business. Yeah. I can take you out into deep water and I can stand that test longer than you can.
Yeah.
Because I've been there.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. I want to approach this, but not in the way that I suspect a lot of people older than you do.
Mm.
You are very, very insightful. And when I gently press, your insight doesn't collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Because there are people who are I think you're probably technically 2 generations below me.
Yeah.
I think you're 25 now.
I just turned 26.
26.
Yeah.
So I'm 52.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2. Anyway, it doesn't matter what it is exactly. The point is, I know and have like friendships and connections with a few people that are like this, that are young. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there has been a bump in collective consciousness that has benefited your generation, perhaps a little bit more than generations before you? And here's why I ask, because you're genuinely intelligent. You don't have a fake intelligence, and I know, because I test the waters with it.
Yeah.
I'll gladly name drop my two mentors, Peter Voog and Mark Lack. Same thing. These guys are young, incredibly successful, and really they have deep intelligence. I didn't see this when I was at that age group.
No.
I wonder if it's the advent of social media giving us a global friends list, and or if it really is, like I was always taught that humanity's consciousness is, I mean, through struggle, and it's not as always smooth, but it's always coming up. It's always rising. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think it's multiple factors.
Yeah.
And I actually, a perfect example is Mark and myself.
Mm-hmm.
I met Mark Lack back in 2016, and Mark will tell you he was not even close to who he is today.
Oh, I know.
And neither was I.
Yeah.
And I mean, I haven't talked to him actually probably since 2016, 2017. So it'd actually be interesting to catch up. But I think a lot of it's a choice. I think a lot of it's ingrained. Some of us are just born a little bit different.
Yeah.
We think a little bit differently. We approach problems a little bit differently. You can say that's coincidence. You can say it's, you can go to that meta of your soul has been here before, so you don't fall for so many small things, whatever it is. But there's something different.
Yeah.
Along with that, I think you have a choice. We have more information than any generation has had before us by, infinite. What you do with that information and what you do with how that information allows you to identify yourself. Yeah. Am I going to identify myself as I just know everything because I have access to everything, therefore I don't need to do anything?
Right.
Or am I going to say I have access to everything, therefore I need to decipher what fits and what doesn't, constantly and consistently.
Yeah.
And I think people like myself, like Mark, like a few other guys that I know that are around our age, I think he's a few years older than I am, we've chosen that second path of I'm just going to decipher.
Right.
I'm going to take the information from people above me who have done it before.
Yeah.
I'm going to filter out what I don't think fits. I'm going to filter in what does fit.
Yeah.
I'm going to take what I see online. I'm going to take what I see when I gauge the populace, the online space, because most of the online space is not our age.
Mm-hmm.
How do I mold my ability and my capacity for change and for helping and for creating new things for people to the online market space? And I think the people who've done that well are the people who probably have chosen, again, that second path. We've chosen to read the right books, listen to the right people, do the right things for ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
Part of it's luck, part of it's coincidence, part of it's we're born this way, part of it is we have access to more information.
You said part of it is we're born this way. So I agree with everything you said. I think that's a very, I don't challenge any part of that assessment. It all sounds right to me. But here's the part that gives me hope. And I think I'm hopeful in spite of being part of a generation who, at least if you watch us on social media, expresses less than hopeful kind of views on things. I think if we were to look at the bell curve, the mushy middle is fairly pessimistic. You know what I mean?
Yes, very much.
But that having been said, when I was coming up, I was sort of the freak who thought like you just described. Mm-hmm. And I didn't happen across, and I was very, very social, but I didn't have 5,000 friends. None of us did, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't have access to a million more. But I still think that there's something good happening because I know a lot of people that are young and they're not just savvy at business. That's one thing. You know, I did know a lot of guys like back in my day, it was like call centers. I knew a bunch of guys making tons of money on call centers that were young and hungry and they had dorsal fins, you know. But this is a different thing, right? This is more of an evolved thing.
Mm-hmm.
You I think embody that. Mark certainly embodies that. Peter embodies that. I could name many others. In fact, our mutual friend Carlos Redlich, who's like, yo, Carlos
is poker in an hour together.
Yeah, he's an extremely sharp, hustling, bright guy. You know, so Carlos, that's for you, buddy. What's your general kind of take on where things are going in terms of generational? Do you feel like we're progressing as a society?
I do, and I think a lot of it is a consequence of giving younger people a voice.
Couldn't agree more, man.
Because we never had that before.
Right.
So what I explain is, and I think genuinely, generations are cyclical. So my generation is very much like the kids of the 60s. The Flower Children, the Woodstock. We have our music festivals.
With better tools.
With much better tools.
Yeah.
And with our history as a reference point of what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
So I think as long as that cycle keeps continuing, now I think also it will continue. I think our children will be much more conservative than my generation is right now.
Interesting.
As far as they'll see a lot of the mistakes, again, the people who've chosen the other direction than myself and some of the people that are my age, I still think that's the fatty majority.
Yeah, I think so too. But I and this is a bit of a tangent, I also think it's the apathetic majority who is sort of pulled along by that highly energized minority.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Yeah. What's that? The entrepreneurial personality type guy, Alex Sharfin.
Yeah.
Alex Sharfin makes a compelling argument that every successful society, and indeed humans throughout history, move toward democratization. They move toward harmony. And you know, I think that, I guess maybe I'm now responding to all the sort of low value fear expressions and even fear mongering and the stuff that's happening today. If we look over if we were to look at human history as a GDP chart, right, it would very much match. It would be highs, lows, but always trending upward.
Yep.
And I guess I think what I'm trying to say here is because I see more people of your generation who are able to hold a deep conversation, able to be successful, able to do these things in a way that isn't sort of like a bad parody of a Jungian archetype, right? You're actually well-rounded. I think that's what kind of bolsters my confidence that even though things can get crazy from time to time, and they do, that's part of the process, that we are trending upward.
I think a good testament is to go outside and look.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think that's what people need to do probably more of right now than ever, because so much online is very polarized and it's very things are this way or that way.
Right.
Go outside and look. People are pretty good. People are doing pretty all right.
It's so funny, right? Yeah.
Job of dealing with each other and communicating with each other and coinciding with one another.
Yeah.
Now, we do have the people on the fringes, but I think as long as we keep that upper down curve growing, once we keep that upper, let's say 1, 2, 3 standard deviations above the norm,
right? Yeah.
As long as we keep increasing that cushion for ourselves and that population keeps growing, we also raise the median. Yeah. So I think the upper, let's say 2, 3 standard deviations above the norm in anything is going to greatly influence the 68.7%, whatever that is, that's the middle of the curve within one standard deviation.
Yeah.
Now it's going a little bit statistic focused, but I think when we look at people, the best people are going to influence the masses. Now, if we have more of the best people, we're going to have more influence over the masses. And again, I think that upper end of the curve is going to increase just because there's more of us. There's more of us saying things that can influence more people.
Yeah.
It's insane to me. I just launched like a beta testing for my masculinity coaching. Mm-hmm. Every single person who signed up is at least 10 years older than I am.
Yeah.
Or maybe 8 years older is like the next youngest person. Everybody who signed up is older than me by a decent margin.
Yeah.
And it's showing that younger people are having a voice. And as long as you prove yourself under the test that people give you, because I get the tests from older people all the time and I welcome them and I understand it.
Sure.
But the way that I conduct myself online, I know completely is why older people are willing to trust me to work with me. I've tapped into something. I've figured something out that people want and need for themselves. And they just want to become a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And I think, from outside, I would say there's a simple, clean purity in the way that you show up. Mm. You, KYREE specifically, the way you show up is it's more free of pretense than the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
And I also want to say to any kids out there, and you thought math wasn't important. I love that we're using statistics to talk about this, because when I finally got around to taking statistics, it gave me a very tangible way to think about lots of parts of the world.
Yeah.
And it holds up. Totally switching topics here completely. I believe that we are witnessing nothing less than the death rattle of racism in this world. I do. I believe that, and that's why it's so ugly right now. And that's why it's gnashing and thrashing and gnarly and horrible. I think that by the time your kids are in their 30s, it's going to be, here's what's happening. What I believe is happening. It's a part of the old guard. Your generation, from what I can tell, and certainly the generation that you guys are creating, is going to look at things like, because of the internet and because of the ability to connect with a global audience and stuff like that, you're going to look at things like secretly hating somebody because they're different than you as silly and antiquated. Now, I know how it gets passed down. It gets taught, right? Mm-hmm. But as a general statement, I believe that some of these old isms, sexism as well, are legitimately 2 or 3 generations from being all but memories.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, we can argue timelines, but I think it is, as our collective intelligence is increasing, I think that is on a very, very steep downward trend. I think to encapsulate what you're saying, I think is exactly that. It is very, very steeply on a downward trend. Because it's on a downward trend, I think those people who are wanting to hold on to it are becoming louder. They are becoming, they're trying to make it seem like it's still holding strong. Mm-hmm. And collectively, we're just not having it anymore. Yeah. Collectively, we're realizing this was something stupid all along that shouldn't have existed in the first place. And why are we having to clean up your mess? Yeah. Why are we having to clean up something that shouldn't have been in existence in the first place?
Right.
And I think that's how a lot of my generation and generations after myself, I think that's how we view it. Why is this even a discussion? Why is this even something we're doing?
Right.
It used to be fight against racism. Mm-hmm. Yes. Now it's almost like we're just staring at it like, you're still? We're doing this? This is something that's going on? But I think that's what stops us from doing things. It's the ridicule from people who are coming up in power in the world, or coming up in voting power, or coming up in legislative power in the world, this is something we're doing.
Yeah.
And it starts to change as soon as people start to feel dumb for having even the conversation being had.
Yeah.
We're still having to talk about this. We're still having to write and protest about this stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it is on a steep decline. And I could see a few generations from now, it becoming something that was, again, we used to do that. That used to be a thing in the world. It's like old Rome and throwing your pee and poop out the window.
Right.
Like that was a thing.
Right.
We couldn't have figured that out. Hopefully it's one of those same things.
Yeah. And I'm willing to predict publicly that it is. I really, it's all of them. So let's just be clear here for not me and KYREE, but the people watching, not just about racism.
Yeah.
It's sexism. It's, I think the one that will be a bit more of a protracted challenge will be classism. I think that's the one that's going to take a little longer.
That's thousands of years. Yeah.
It might be. Yeah, it might be.
I'm talking about it's been embedded thousands.
Oh, embedded for, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But once again, these are the kind of things that give me a tremendous amount of optimism for where we're going, for the future. Mm-hmm. And again, I feel like some of the people in my world now, like yourself and some of the others I mentioned, really, you guys are emblematic of that to me. And so that makes me very happy. Let's talk about where you see things going in the next 30 years.
Yeah. Just in the world in general.
Yeah. Whatever comes up for you first. But I'm just curious what your vision of the future is.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of my work is going towards, I guess, what I'd like to see in the future. So that's kind of at the forefront of my mind.
Right.
Is it's helping men build a better foundation for themselves of identity, who you're going to be and how you're going to show up in the world.
Yeah.
I believe that our identities shape our behaviors.
Yeah.
And we have to create structures for ourselves around those behaviors. Mm-hmm. If this happens, then this is how I respond. And I think setting that up for people or helping people think through that may not have had the home training to learn that is a big piece of my work, is a big piece of what I know I'm just supposed to do.
Nice.
I call it sometimes rewriting that shitty story that your father or that society or whoever told you who you're supposed to be in the world. Mm-hmm. It's a rewriting or a redefining of what that looks like for you. I'd say that's a big piece. I mean, and this is something that can be taken the wrong way. It can be taken as a hot take or whatever. Societies with better, stronger men have always thrived more.
I was just going to bring that up. It seems like, the kind of work that you and I do, it's important for us to balance the idea that it may never be a complete, there may not be a 100% adoption of what we teach. Mm-hmm. But it's important to look at the world as it would be if there was. Mm-hmm. And I think from that perspective, if somehow all men understood what I'm going to say real, like evolved, healthy masculinity was, we would have so many social problems eradicated. And the same with women, right? And this, by the way, women, this doesn't mean you can't be a welder, doesn't mean you can't be a lesbian, none of that stuff, right? It's just about understanding and sort of living within the polarities that exist, no matter what the dynamic of your relationship or anything like that, or the dynamic of yourself. If you're a badass welding dyke, then get a lipstick femme, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know enough about that world to speak informedly, but the point being, so much of what we see and we want to fix and we know is wrong seems to trace back to these like really weak, undeveloped personal identities. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's also having never been taught that.
And that's where it comes from.
Never been asked.
Right.
Who am I and who do I need to be in the world? How do I need to show up for the people who need or who look to me for advice, for help, for support?
Yeah.
How do I need to show up for these people? I don't think people ask themselves those questions enough.
I don't
So
either.
if we can start at least getting people to think about and ask the question, I think we start on an upward trend. I think that's how we create the upward trend. Like you said, no, we don't adopt 100% of what I say.
Right.
And I almost always will caveat my positions with mold this to your own reality. I can only speak from my own experience. I can only speak from my own reality, my own perception of the world.
Right.
But hopefully, even if you don't have that same reality or doesn't closely fit mine, you can at least pick something that you can fit into your own reality and take something of value from what I have to say.
Yeah.
So no, not everybody's supposed to be the same. Not everybody. We would hate it if everybody was.
Yeah, this is
but
not
I think
a
if
call.
we're able to trend,
right?
If we're able to trend towards something, I think that's a win for us.
Yeah, and this is not a call for homogeneity by any means.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. It's way more interesting if you're over there doing you and I'm over here doing me.
Please.
But there's something to be said for sort of like recalibrating yourself back to that center. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
And recalibrating yourself back to a core that we can all hold on to.
Yeah.
We can all say this is something solid that we can hold on to. And if I feel like venturing out a little bit, or I feel like I'm different over here, or I don't quite fit this piece, as long as the core is something we can agree on, that is positive, that is moving us forward, I think that's our way that we, again, start to trend upwards.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to do the standard sort of shout out to where people can go find you?
No.
I didn't think so. I didn't think you needed to, man.
No, my name's KYREE.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the time with me. I knew it was going to be a good conversation, man. I love what you're up to. Keep putting it out there, bro.
Thank you, man. Likewise.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.